The following is a Podcast One Minnesota production.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
If it's made in Minnesota, who's making it and how?
Yeah, you got that right.
It's the Makers of Minnesota, focusing on the products and services uniquely made in Minnesota, and conversations with the makers, entrepreneurs, and innovators in Minnesota about how they conceived of their products and how they brought them to market. With Stephanie Hansen, it's the Makers of Minnesota.
Hi, this is Stephanie Hansen, and you are listening to episode 44 of the Makers of Minnesota. I have the privilege today of talking to Jeff Warner. He is it Warner or Werner?
Yeah, Warner.
Warner, that's what I thought. But then as I said it, I know another Jeff Warner from St. Paul. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I said that wrong, who you probably know too from Warner Stellian. In any case, we've been playing Old Home Week. We're both from St. Paul, and Jeff is with Alchemy Architects. And he doesn't realize this, but I drive by his place. They're in this building that's very cool off Raymond, called like the Prairie Lakes Building. And in the parking lot for a while this winter was a kind of weird box-looking contraption that I kept thinking, what is that? What is that? So I looked you up, and here you are today as a guest of the podcast. Welcome.
Cool. Well, it's a good excuse to find out that you were stalking us.
I kind of was. So what I saw in your parking lot at Alchemy was something that's called the Light Hotel. It's like a movable, wee-looking hotel room. And then I toured it also last summer. And I thought, okay, this is the coolest thing ever. And I'm sort of obsessed with wee houses and trying to live smaller. I'm not doing it, but I'm obsessed with the idea that I could. And so I came across a Light Hotel, and then I came across what you guys were doing with wee houses, and here you are.
Yeah, awesome.
So you started out as an architect. What got you excited about sort of the wee house or the smaller living ideas?
You know, when you start out with an architect, when I went to school in the 80s.
I was going to say the dinosaur ages.
Exactly,
but...
that's right, pre-computer age. You know, it was all about the modern architects and the sort of the ideal of the architect doing everything and being a real star and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I worked for a really great office for a few years in school and after school, and I realized I didn't know really how to put stuff together. That wasn't their fault. That was my fault. And so I quit, and I started doing small projects on my own with my own hands, really learning more about a lot of different materials and how to put things together. And, you know, if you're going to start out and be a stubborn young person like I was and like a lot of my friends were, you take small jobs, you take whatever you can. And so a lot of those jobs that we started out with were small. And, you know, I lived in a bungalow, and we renovated the hell out of that bungalow and put, 10 pounds of food, let's say, in that 5-pound bag, and so we've been in one way or another kind of dealing with that kind of ethos of smaller is not necessarily worse, you know.
Did you make things for your house, like tables that were compatible to do multiple things and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, you know, bungalows are awesome. You know, they're not, I mean, they're maybe small by today's standards. We lived in a 800,000 square foot bungalow, depending on pre versus post renovation.
Yeah.
But they're great houses, and you really didn't need to really have a table that folds out into a bed and also into a table or a desk.
Yep. You had enough space as long as you were efficient about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and not to digress about tables and the dining room, but as an architect, I think it's interesting that sort of we went to these big great rooms because everybody wanted to be together and everybody sort of congregates in the kitchen. So you had these sort of kitchen living room arrangements, which has given way to the loss of the formal dining room. Has that been your experience as an architect? I think that's just kind of an interesting trend.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, bungalows are incredible, but they also have that formal, the kitchen's off in one corner. It's typically you got like 4 doors going into the kitchen, so the first thing people ask is, how do I get rid of all my doors in my kitchen so I can actually have a counter, for example? And then, removing that wall between the kitchen and dining and just really opening up the whole house really makes the house actually seem bigger in a lot of different ways and more functional, more flexible. And, obviously that's really the way we kind of live and think about living and eating and inhabiting our houses today.
When you were an architect student, was the wee house or the mini house movement a thing?
No.
So do you remember when you first heard about it?
It's a thing? I've never heard of that before. Our work really grew out as I said, the bungalow. And so I've never really thought about it as sort of a conscious thing that we would do really, really small houses. And that changed a little bit when we had a project for a client in Pepin, Wisconsin. So Stephanie Arado was one of our first clients, and she really wanted a retreat in Pepin. She'd spent all of her money on her land. She had $50,000 left to build a structure that even in, about 2001 wasn't a lot of money. So we said, hey, we can build you like a pole barn, like a big space with nothing inside it. Or we can build you a little jewel box with really not anything, not like water or electricity, but we can make it really nice. And she chose the latter. And because it was a little jewel box, we sort of figured, hey, maybe we can make this off-site. And since, as I said, some of my background was in making things with my hands, basically 3 of us made that, our intent was to make it in our workshop and, ship it over to the site. And that was really my first experience with kind of off-site building and even thinking about that kind of thing, really. And the whole kind of current fascination with people in tiny houses and, programs on tiny houses and all this kind of stuff is I think, sort of a coincidence, but it really grows out of a lot of the things that we've been seeing in terms of just more sustainable attitudes, more of a reduction in our own personal footprints overall.
And you have wehouse.com and you make these wee houses, but I want to make sure that I explain them in a way that the listener will be able to understand, because I almost saw them more as, do you remember when there was like a chunk of Skyway that was floating around for years that someone finally bought it and turned it into a living structure?
Yeah, those are friends of mine, who
really?
own those other dreamy architects, talented dreamy architects.
Yeah, so when I look, what you're doing with the wee house is you're taking sort of prefabbed structure materials, and then you can assemble them in different ways. So it's not necessarily like a tiny house per se, but it's a way to refashion a sustainable product to make, like in the case, if you look at your website, there's one that's the jewel box that was your first, but there's also more like townhome kind of looking structures with garages underneath. They're just very versatile.
Yeah, well, what we think of a tiny houses these days, are typically something that sits on a trailer. And
right.
So you can kind of picture like, okay, I get it. It's like small and I can go down the road, right? So when we did the first initial wee house for Stephanie, it was a modern box. I mean, it was really a square, sort of a rectangular tube. And I call it a tube because it had the long walls were all glass.
Yeah.
You could see right through
really
the thing.
cool.
You could open it all up. Super simple. Inexpensive, but really, really spacious. I mean, we had like 3 families in there, on a one rainy day. You know what I mean? So many people saw that when it ended up being in Met Home's holiday gift guide.
Uh-huh.
We sent out, we got it done, and we said, great, we're going to get published, and people are going to see the beautiful pictures, and they're going to want us to do other design work for them. They put it in their holiday gift guide because we said it was $50,000. So they said, oh, you can give it to your sweetie for Christmas or whatever. And at that point, we said, oh, maybe we ought to try to make a program to produce more of these in a way that really shortens the whole design period for people.
Mm-hmm.
So we really looked at the process for building them in modular factories. So there's modular factories all around the country that do this exact kind of work. So it's similar to mobile homes. It's just that they make custom modular. And so being architects, we kind of felt like we needed to fuss with every project because there's reasons to fuss with that, which we can go into later or not. But we really tried to produce a flexible program in which you could make a 300 square foot house and you can make a 3,000 square foot house, basically made up of pre-made boxes that have their kitchens, their lighting, the windows, the insulation, the electrical, essentially everything you need to inhabit your house, all finished as it comes out of the factory.
And this is so cool to me because it also takes like your design abilities and it makes it so that you could be working with someone in Washington, D.C., someone in Baltimore, all over the country without necessarily having to be on site navigating the whole build out. Is that correct?
I know. I mean, that's a lot for, a couple of kids from the
really
Twin
cool.
Cities. We're not supposed to be doing stuff like that.
So how did the Light Hotel that you worked with at Alchemy come out of this wee house?
So, we've been working with the Wee House for a lot of different years. And I think the really great thing is it's provided a platform to make smaller, more efficient, high-quality houses. But there's still really a pretty intense design process that goes with that.
How many do you think you've made so far?
We've made close to 50.
Mm-hmm.
We designed more than that. And for one reason or another, they don't all get built. But they're all really tailored to their to their site and to our clients,
right?
So that they can really be, I think, works of architecture, I guess. And they're really, they're more sustainable, they're more usable if you custom design them. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been thinking about really ways that we can not leverage the tiny house movement as much as really simplify our Wee House concept to do something then that is really something that we can literally almost sort of push a button to make. So there's really, a lot fewer customizations you make. And with the rise in Minneapolis with the ADU code they have now for allowing accessory dwellings in essentially your backyard.
In your backyards, yeah, the grandmother apartments or whatever they're going to call them.
We said, hey, this was actually a practical opportunity then to tie what we've already been wanting to do within a need out in the marketplace. And I wouldn't really call it as much as like a business, plan to take over the world or anything, but it's more of one that's, say, kind of dovetails with our goals to just, build smarter and more intelligently, I guess.
So this Light Hotel, it is a really beautiful, functional little room with a bathroom, and it travels around and people can stay in it, and it's been in urban environments. It was in the Walker Sculpture Garden, I heard, apparently, for a little while. And I know it's been at the Stone Arch Festival and different festivals, and you can literally spend the night in this thing. Where is it right now?
Yeah, I'm sorry for sort of diverging there,
okay.
but the Lighthouse was this ADU kind of thing, and the Light Hotel then is really an art piece that we did to really explore what small mobile, something that essentially could fit in a 20-foot shipping container could do. And so that's exactly what we did. So the thing you saw in our parking lot was a 20-foot shipping container on a trailer, which happens all the time. But you might have noticed it because it had a couple funky windows, and it had a little porch on the outside, and it had a light sticking out of the top of it, and it had solar panels on the top. And so you tweak some of these things that you see every day, which is container trucks, and you make them so that there's something funky about them. And you also tie into that thing people who are living in the Midwest seeing, say, grain elevators. I don't know who's ever seen a grain elevator who hasn't thought, oh, I'd like to live in a grain elevator.
Right.
Wouldn't it be cool to inhabit that? And so that's the same thing with this container thing. We wanted to make kind of an art piece that moves around, that you could actually inhabit. And because it moves around, you could, say, put it in Rice Park, or you could put it in the Walker Sculpture Garden, or you could put it out in the front of Hubbard Broadcasting, and live there for a day. And let's say you made it like a hotel room, you could experience the city in really a temporary way as sort of a permanent resident or a temporary resident in a different way, and see the city in a different way than you do every day.
It's kind of weird. I moved this year, and I've always been in the city, but I moved into a much more urban environment in that I'm very close to the sidewalk. In my old home, I was sort of set back and on a corner lot. So while I was still in the city, it felt very suburban, just in the amount of space that we had. and wow, was that, like really the city was right in my face. Cars, buildings, people moving on the sidewalk in a way that I hadn't even considered or thought about before. And it really does give you a different connection to your neighbors and to just the world around you because you're literally in it versus observing it somewhat from afar. So I thought that was kind of interesting just in terms of urban living and how you can still be living in Highland Park, but the where of where you live really can make a difference and how you interact with the people around you.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. And the densification of our cities really creates new opportunities for us to live and work together in a way that's really exciting rather than sort of threatening or, the perceptions have changed even the last 10 or 15 years about what it means to live in the city and really what kind of things are going on.
So you've been doing this for, 25 some years, it sounds like. As we move into the new era of the millennials, and we spend an endless amount of time talking about the millennials, it seems like I feel like they're going to be more comfortable in smaller spaces. I think these really small apartments, that your concept fits really right into that, having a smaller footprint. Do you feel like that you're really well positioned for this trend, as it were?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's entirely... we're sort of targeting that market, but I think there's a lot of people who are seeing the same way, and millennials experience or value experiences over things a lot of times, and I feel like if you're going to have things, I'm not someone who covets things necessarily, but we spend all of our time creating things and making things that then are going to really have meaning to us and have a long-lasting value, and that by the way, we can actually afford. And we want them, to then go out and change our life in some sort of meaningful way, I think, which is, who has the right to do that, And, any architect is going to tell you that they'd rather spend a lot more time and energy on something that's really sort of smaller and thought out rather than palatial and grandiose.
Yeah. And do you feel like there will be expanded market for you if people are more used to living in smaller spaces?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that some of the things we're doing, we've been taking little baby steps in terms of trying to understand, pretty deeply what the ADU really needs and how we can produce it at the right kind of, I guess, value cost for people,
right,
process-wise and cost-wise, and what it has to have and maybe what it shouldn't have, or what's kind of optional. And there haven't been a lot of ADUs in the last couple of years since that ordinance in Minneapolis was passed because people are trying to figure that out.
And
right?
What does that stand for?
Accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, so it's something that's not your primary domicile. It's attached to your property in the back, on the side, in your, and it's something that can be a fully licensed living situation.
Correct.
Is my understanding.
Yeah,
and it can be plumbed and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it needs to be plumbed. It needs to be connected to electricity. There's certain minimum sizes a lot of times of around 300 or 400 square feet, and certain maximum sizes somewhere between 600 and 800 or 1,000 square feet, depending on the particularities of your site.
I wonder when we talk about families living together and maybe creating a situation where instead of putting, your mom or your grandma in an apartment, she's in the backyard in a smaller type of living unit. You mentioned price. Is there a price point for 800 square feet that feels like it's doable for something like that, and then where it's priced out of the market?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about 800 square feet, a lot of people are probably looking at their apartment, their two-bedroom apartment going, well, I live in less than 800 square feet and it's just fine. Right. And so, but when you move that into a house size, that's, say, a small bungalow or something. We actually owned a house in Prospect Park, not far from where we are right now, that was about 600 square feet or something. And it was an awesome little house.
Yeah.
It was super great. And so really, I don't think of that as really, roughing it too much.
Right.
And I think that there's a really good conversation to be had amongst houses about that size, then down to the tiny house movement, which is, say, 100, 150 square feet, which is like really, really tiny. And there's, the kind of things that people are trying to achieve with their tiny houses are a little bit different than what we're trying to do in terms of making permanent sort of fabric in the city. You know what I mean? These are not going to move around. These are going to be really little jewels, hopefully little jewels, as a sort of part of our city in a different way than, say, a trailer or something.
What you're doing really appeals to me in that way, because I think, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I moved. I kind of shed a lot of the 25 years of stuff, and I feel like I almost could do it again in a smaller way. Like once you get rid of a lot of stuff, it's very freeing. And, a lot of people have cabins or land, but they don't have the money to sort of build that dream home. Maybe it doesn't have to be that. Maybe it can just be something that's smaller, still lovely. The box that Jewel box, I think is what you called it, is very lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I love it. Are you busy?
We are busy. Yeah. I think that things have changed a lot. When we first started the We House, it was right in 2001, 2002, and the economy was going great guns, just like it is right now.
Yeah.
And, we and other people were looking for other ways of getting stuff built, right? And so we just looked at it from a practical, like, well, what are our tools? What should we do? And that we're in that situation right now, too. But another thing that's changed is the recession really wasn't all that bad in relation to what it did with the conversations we've had about commodities and stuff and energy usage. And so you've seen a lot of things come out of the recession, sort of as like a phoenix from the ashes about, what we can do to power houses with very little energy. All the products that are out there that people have been able to, say, quit their jobs. Well, they didn't quit, they were fired.
Yeah.
Or they didn't have any clients or customers. And so they basically went off and said, great, I'm going to do this cool thing over here. And now what we see is all these things are just more ubiquitous and lower cost and higher quality. And it allows us to do some really exciting, high quality structures.
So tell me about the project that you're working on right now. Like, can you think of one that you're just like so excited to see it be built?
In town here?
Not necessarily.
Well, in town here, we're helping somebody put essentially like a guest house office on top of a 22nd story of a building downtown, right off of Rice Park.
Cool. So they're putting a box on top of this high rise.
Yeah. And, just the pragmatics of getting it up there, it has to be really lightweight. It has to be small. And, there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't have to be cheap, right? And it wants to be really high quality, and it's got a view unlike any other, but just the small space. I mean, when you think about the spaces that are really striking to you a lot of times, they're not necessarily big spaces, right? I mean, they can be just a cubby somewhere.
So that's cool. Is it like, I don't know if you can say, it's like a hotel or someone is someone doing it for promotion, or do they?
No, this is
a person that's going to live and have it as their guest house.
Yeah, it's part of essentially their house up there.
Oh, that is so amazing.
And then on the other scale, we're also working with another building developer in Uptown area.
Yeah.
And so he's got a 3-story warehouse building that he's, fully inhabited with other his office is there, and there's other creative businesses have moved in there. He's done a great job fixing up the building. And he wants to put 2 stories of residential lofts upstairs there. And so we're going to do We Houses lofts up on the building. And really the cool part about it is he wants to inhabit it himself. And, it's only going to be, less than 10,000 square feet altogether, but there's going to be about 7 or 8 units up there. And
oh, that's so cool.
The whole kind of way of really doing something that, I mean, it's not like I love Uptown.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff in Uptown it looks the same.
Yeah.
So how can you bring sort of a different process and really do something which has integrity and kind of pulls out the this kind of off-site manufactured with this kind of industrial history and make something that is aspirational, sort of sitting on top of the building. And so I think we're going to be, well, I know we're going to be doing this as something that's kind of, it's going to be hard to tell whether this is necessarily new or maybe has been there for, 50 or 100 years.
That is so cool. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
I hope someone, Minneapolis, St. Paul, or someone does a story so we can see it and see the inside of it. In terms of, you're a creative person, you're also a business person. What's the day-to-day, part of running your business that you hate?
I like to sit down and design buildings. Every once in a while, I'll go out and talk about buildings.
Yeah.
But I really like to sit there and do the work. I don't mind doing some of the unpleasant things about, detailing them and pricing them.
Yeah.
But that whole bookkeepy kind of paperworky thing is not my deal. I'd rather be out there with a hammer and saw and making it happen on my own.
So you need a good operations person, it sounds like.
Well, we've got a really great mix of people in the office, and so luckily I definitely don't have to do it alone.
And that's great as an entrepreneur, where you get to the point where you know the things you're good at and you can hire out for the things that you're not and build a team.
Yeah.
That's when it really, really works. We talked about the Light Hotel. Where is it for the summer?
It is at the St. Anthony Park Community Gardens over near our office.
Okay.
And we just, I just, before coming over here, talked to the Prospect Park neighborhood about getting it into the Towerside Park. And we're really hoping that will be over there in the next month, which is great. It's right next to the light rail station. It's got a view of downtown. And it's in a community garden.
Which is very cool.
Super cool, yeah. Very accessible and really about their mission as well as ours.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you talking to me today about the We House movement. Someday, I swear I'll hire you. I don't know for what yet. I have to find some land that's in a very weird spot because land is so hard to find. It's wehouse.com. You can also find lighthotel.com if you're interested in finding out about the Light Hotel. And then, of course, the name of the business is Alchemy Architects. You have a great website that shows a lot of your projects, so I would encourage people to go there and check it out.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.